Welcome to Advanced TV Herstory. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams. This is the place where we connect the dots of TV and feminism to American culture and politics. If you like what you hear, head to tvherstory.com and listen into all of our archives that are categorized to make it easier to find what you're looking for. And also while you're there, please sign up for our newsletter. Promise I'll never sell your information. Now on with the show. Hey there, TV Herstorians. We're logging another episode of our TV talk show series, and this one I'm really excited about. It's the lesson of what I think of as a TV talk show style that includes a certain panache, an appearance that is just so calculated. And it is demonstrated by one of the finest actors of all time, Vivien Leigh, also a personal favorite. Depending upon your age, you may have no idea who Vivien Leigh was, and you know what? That's totally fair. She passed away in July of 1967 at the age of 53 due to tuberculosis and pneumonia. We're bringing you this episode in March 2024, in part because it's Oscar season and because we're doing this series on TV talk shows. Telejournalist Edward R. Murrow's talk show, Small World, is, for a number of reasons, just profound. First of all, it's quite high-tech for its time, and I'll explain more about that in a minute. Also, it covers some fascinatingly progressive topics, not just for its time, 1958, but for even how we think about things today. And also, because it's one of the very few bits of video available today for regular public viewing that is of Vivien Leigh being herself. So, Vivien Leigh, in her relatively short film career, she also had an extensive theater career. Leigh earned 2 Academy Awards for leading actress. First in Gone with the Wind in 1939, and later, 1952, for her role as Blanche in A Streetcar Named Desire. Listeners, you will find episodes of Murrow's Small World available on YouTube. And honestly, these are time capsules of notable world figures. Like, you have to just Wikipedia who the people are, let alone be able to grasp and put context around what they're talking about. Murrow lightly manages the conversation with his guests who participate wherever they happen to be. So it's like literally just like a Zoom session. We see Vivien at her London flat, and it's very well decked out, thank you. We see famed studio head Samuel Goldwyn in his office, and British film critic Kenneth Tynan in what appears to be his office, or maybe his entryway for all we know. Murrow himself appears at his desk with an impressive array of books behind him. It's all in black and white. And the cool part is that the setup seemingly is a 4-way telephone call, and then there are film crews in each location, which then required an incredible amount of editing just to get it back all into one package. So who's Edward R. Murrow? Well, he rose to fame as a radio reporter and broadcaster during World War II and successfully transitioned from radio to television news. He had that look. He has the look that sort of became the stereotypical white male anchor broadcaster dude. You know, Peter Jennings, Walter Cronkite, Dan Rather. Edward R. Murrow was one of the first. Interestingly enough, we see him and Vivien and Ken Tynan smoking during the episode, like big puffs of smoke. I swear, you can almost smell it when you watch. Now, one of the guests, at the age of 20, film mogul Samuel Goldwyn emigrated to the U.S. from Poland. This is in the late 1800s. He was penniless and ambitious. He joined the growing industry of vaudeville entertainment, which, as we all know, morphed into film, and in Hollywood just continued to rise and became the middle name of the very famous Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, also MGM, empire. Goldwyn, however, in this, 1958, was in his late 70s, and you'll be able to clearly hear his Polish accent as well as the notions of a white man who is struggling to retain the norms and grandeur of his lifetime's efforts and accomplishments. You will hear change in the air. Now, part of that change is actually pushed from a guy whose reputation as being prickly, precedes him almost. British critic Kenneth Tynan represented that change because he was somewhat younger than everybody else in this interview. Tynan's very busy, prolific career challenged the established ways of acceptability of art. And that wasn't just theater or film, but also the traditional art of painting and sculpture. He too died in his 50s of emphysema, no less. But as a critic, he praised talent. He called out artists who were coasting on their laurels. And he attempted to shine a spotlight on how art can bring about social change. And that really, if in fact he was terse and abrupt and biting, he at least thought he was headed in the right direction. So all I can say is, holy mackerel, what a lineup.
This is Sam Goldwyn in Hollywood.
This is Vivien Leigh in London.
This is Ken Tynan in New York.
This is Small World, and this is Ed Murrow in New York. Good evening. Tonight on Small World, the world of motion pictures.
It would be interesting to know how long the actual conversation lasted. Small World was a 30-minute episode that comes out to about 27 minutes once you remove the commercials, which the person who posted it to YouTube did. The editors teed up the first controversial topic, one of Tynan's reviews that criticized a Broadway production of a Rodgers and Hammerstein show where a Japanese actor was cast as a character of Chinese descent. Now, modern-day thinkers can understand the importance of this representation and what had to have been an abundance of Chinese actors as well as Japanese actors available for the role. But Goldwyn, in hearing Tynan's case, equated then the artistic license that could be used, which was used for Vivien Leigh, who as a Brit was famously cast twice as an American with a distinctly Southern accent and vulnerable style. So Samuel Goldwyn could not quite, and even Vivien Leigh could not quite equate. They were trying to equate a person's color with culture and find it acceptable.
Well, I think if you're going to present the Chinese people authentically and as they ought to be presented on a stage, you've got to pay some kind of respect to their origins and their culture, their appearance, and get a kind of authenticity that I felt didn't exist in that show, because there are differences of background and temperament between Chinese and Japanese, which are tremendously marked.
Ken, you might as well say that no English actor should play in a Chekhov play or an Ibsen play.
If the entire cast's English or German, okay.
But what does it matter if they're artists?
So I think you'll agree that there's a lack of understanding about ethnic representation, specifically for roles that call out a character's race being distinctly different from the others in the cast. So there is about a 14-year age difference between Leigh and Tynan in this conversation. And you also should know that Leigh was an incredibly intense and competitive actor. It is historic how she sought out the role of Scarlett O'Hara. And to some degree, though, if you have the chance to watch this or at least listen to the rest of these clips, you do hear a bit of a sorrow or a sadness that perhaps she has also aged out of plum film roles, like her career is in its past.
I think truth is the keynote of all acting or of all artists. And I don't really understand what Ken's saying, because I don't think you would call it a stylized film in any way. It's not like an 18th century comedy, for instance. It was a perfectly human story, and as modern as they come, really. The fact that you wear a costume doesn't make any difference to your mind, and if your mind is truthfully playing the character you're supposed to be playing, the costumes and whether you have a fan in your hand or anything, it doesn't make any difference at all. But then the only interesting thing, I think, is to play as many different things as possible. I think typecasting and type acting is one of the menaces, really, because you get used to what somebody's going to do, and then it holds no surprise for you. And if you're not going to be surprised in life, it's a pity, I think.
Rewatching this, I have to say, my mind immediately thought about Hattie McDaniel and Butterfly McQueen, two women actors of color whose entire careers were premised on a racial limitation imposed by others to their acting opportunities. McDaniel was the first actress of color to win an Oscar for a Best Supporting Actress in Gone with the Wind. Most people know that. Most people also know that it literally took decades, many decades, for the next person, Halle Berry, to win. Both McDaniel and McQueen were accomplished actresses who spent a ton of time in vaudeville and in theater, in black theater, because there was that segregation. They never had the chance to be in a role on film other than that of a domestic or a nanny. I just can't emphasize that enough, that Vivien had a blindness to this issue, or else she just chose to accept it because it was beyond her power. However, Vivien earns a feminist merit badge in my eyes for having to listen to Tynan's insufferable mansplaining. And like maybe, she was very used to and knew exactly how to deal with, because Tynan, in fact, refers to grown women as girls. It's 1958.
Miss Leigh mentioned typecasting, which of course is a product of the star system. And I suppose one reason that she has not been typed is the fact that she is a genuine actress as well as a star.
Isn't the definition of a star there, Vivien, a girl who can stare into a camera and convince every man out there that she needs him and cannot exist without him?
Well, no, I don't think that applies entirely. She may think she wants to say that to everybody, men, women, and children. I don't think men are all that important.
But isn't there a special kind of hungering, yearning, needing expression which Garbo had, which Marlene Dietrich has, and I also think you have it, this sort of look of unutterable need, and everybody in the audience feels, my goodness, she needs me.
My goodness, Ken, I think that a certain waif-like, if you like, I don't mean waif-like, but I think people shouldn't appear too sure of themselves, because they probably aren't, as a rule.
Listeners, watching this, you literally need a scoreboard, because Tynan and Leigh unexpectedly volley opinions respectfully, but they don't hold back. So they're very calculated in what they say. And yes, this was probably heavily edited, but still it was a deeper conversation for 1958 than many people might have expected. In part 2, and again, this episode is broken up on YouTube into 3 parts, Tynan serves up what he sees as how political acts are a part of most forms of art. He brings up a hypothetical, maybe a real situation, of casting a Negro, his word, not mine, as a normal person, his phrase, not mine. Well, Sam Goldwyn doesn't really know what to do with that, because his entire career was spent keeping performers of color in a small box. In fact, he's elsewhere in this interview talking about his production that he sponsored of Porgy and Bess. And so he is very much immersed in an old world representation of people of color. But Sam Goldwyn also held firm to those limits that I talked about of Butterfly McQueen and Hattie McDaniel only being able to have subservient roles in films. That was Goldwyn's career. He could have gone out on a limb and offered to change it, but always there was this quote unquote fear of losing the audiences of the South. In other words, losing racists. They did not want to reduce their audiences in any way. So instead, Goldwyn kind of interprets it as how to tell a story and that it's not a political act. Murrow steps in and redirects to Vivien, and he says, "Oh, well, Vivien, what about the role of what is the role of a point of view in a sense?" And she hears what the question is.
Miss Leigh, do you think movies, or for that matter the theater, ought to have a point of view?
I do.
Well, this has a point of view.
I do. In fact, I agree with Ken that they have a point of view whether they really want to or not, because any good playwright cannot help being taken up with the way the world is going. And I suppose politics come into that. I know nothing about politics, and I don't think I like them at all. But I think that the social conditions in every country are bound to come into any play of any interest. Whether it's brought in or not, pure propaganda, I naturally don't like, because I think it's always pretty dull. But I think it comes into any play or any movie, whether that movie sets out to put it in or not. Because I think any dramatist of any stature naturally deals with the world as he sees it.
Parts 2 and 3 are filled with more lively debate about stage and opera and directors and producers. All 3 of these people, Ken Tynan, Samuel Goldwyn, and Vivien Leigh, come from different perspectives, different amounts of experience. And, I think Vivien did a good job of holding down her opinions, at least, the opinions we have never gotten to hear. And much of what is referenced are the big names and the big shows that were big throughout the 40s and 50s, which is now, is 70 and 80 years ago. I am super grateful to the YouTube account Taylor Mays, links will be in the show notes, who posted these to YouTube, because I am only left with a sense of loss that Vivien Leigh had a lot to say. She had a tremendous amount of experience and had few opportunities to express herself. She never wrote her memoirs. Passing at the age of 53, you don't think when you're 48 you should be writing your memoirs. And while much has been written about her, and it usually includes, they try to include her voice in the form of personal letters, because those were the days of writing letters, found in scores of collections, whether they were her collections or those of other prominent people that she hung with in the heyday of British theater. But letters are not the same as the voice that you've heard. Leigh's career was cut short not just due to her age, but because she was becoming labeled as difficult and unpredictable to work with, because she was experiencing symptoms of uncontrolled bipolar disorder. So this is in 1958. She's in good form, good spirits, and for the video at least, she looks quite healthy. She was not able to access lithium because lithium wasn't even tested for its use to control the effects of bipolar disorder until 1974. And it was another 10 years before Patty Anna Duke explained the disorder and lithium's effects, its tremendous effects, on TV to Phil Donahue on his national talk show. In 2016, one of the first episodes I did of Advanced TV Herstory, we explore Patty Anna Duke's amazing TV herstory. Her real name was Anna, and so those who are the most ardent followers call her Anna because that was her given name. She was given the name Patty Duke to make her sound more TV friendly and entertainment friendly. And she did have an incredible career, but she was also bipolar. And she was very honest about it. And in 1984, 85, and 86, that just wasn't done. Getting back to this episode of Small World, I'm also thankful for the TV executives who thought that this level of critical thinking was important for viewers across America. And they spent big money to bring these voices together. I find Small World and every YouTube time capsule that I encounter simply fascinating. And this is why I podcast. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams. Please check out Taylor Mayes, TaylorMayes, Taylor Mayes' channel on YouTube. It is fascinating. Got some other good stuff there. Thank you, Taylor Mayes. If you're interested in Vivien Leigh's incredible career, find books. You'll find them at the library. Go for the newer ones that are more medically accurate. She did live a complicated life and has been biographized so many times that the early ones just simply didn't have all the details or the science. As always, thank you to Jazzer, whose music is found at freemusicarchive.org. That is our ditty. Thank you to the team behind this work, this podcast, Mary Lou Murrow, for skillfully extracting audio from this 66-year-old recording that just landed in our laps, although landed in my lap many years ago, and I've been sitting on this for so long. And Nivea Lopez, who visually makes my telling this story a bit more compelling. Thank you, Nivea. Most importantly, thanks to you for sticking with us as we try these new approaches, both audio and video. Thanks for recommending us to your friends. And please do send me your thoughts. Go to tvherstory.com for ways to connect with us and to sign up for our newsletter. Your information will never be sold, but we want to hear from you. Ideas for the future, comments about what you've heard, send it, bring it. As always, thanks for listening and watching.